It's been 40 years since the last Texas Chainsaw video game. One of the very first video games based on a horror film, the Texas Chain Saw Massacre for the Atari 2600 saw you take control of Leatherface with one objective: kill as many girls as you can before your chainsaw runs out of fuel. You can imagine it didn't take long for retailers to pull it from the shelves, leading to poor sales and no sequels. Now, Gun Interactive is unleashing the Texas Chain Saw Massacre across consoles and PC, an exciting horror multiplayer game set around the events of the original 1974 slasher classic.
Gonna be fine.
I'm fully embracing the hype. To prepare myself, I've set out to watch all 803 minutes of Texas Chainsaw film, diving deep into its sequels and the legacy left in its wake. Warning, here be spoilers.
The Texas Chain Saw Massacre. After you stop screaming, you'll start talking about it.
The one that started it all. The Texas Chain Saw Massacre follows a group of friends as they accidentally stumble across the estate of a family of cannibals who pick them off one by one. Here he is, Leatherface. It's impossible to deny how important this psycho is in horror history. Loosely based on a true story, many people consider the Texas Chainsaw Massacre to be the most violent and goriest film ever made. Funnily enough, the film is relatively bloodless. Chainsaw is a rough watch. There isn't a whole lot of story, but its magic is in how goddamn uncomfortable it is. Where a good chunk of horror is set in the dark, Chainsaw effectively makes sunlight scary. The searing Texas sun is blinding, and instead of worrying about what could be lurking in the shadows, your concern is what lies beyond that lens flare. Made for just $140,000 US, the movie was a mega hit, which means it would spawn sequels. Eventually. Fast forward 12 years. Where that first film is horrifying, harsh, and messy, the Texas Chainsaw Massacre 2 is a bit more polished, but most oddly of all, a black comedy rather than a straight-out horror movie. This doesn't mean that it's bad. In fact, the movie is so delightfully 80s and everything is cranked up to 11. It's hard not to laugh. Leatherface is a little more sympathetic, or as sympathetic as a chainsaw-wielding maniac can be. One scene has him getting a little randy with his chainsaw. Fun fact, the Texas Chainsaw Massacre 2 was banned here in Australia until 2006, but a few copies of the New Zealand uncut version that was released on VHS in 1987 could be found illegally at some Aussie video stores.
Leatherface, Texas Chainsaw Massacre 3.
In the late 80s, New Line Cinema, hot off their success of their Nightmare on Elm Street franchise, bought the rights to the Texas Chainsaw Massacre in the hope to kick off a new series. Back is a bit of the rawness, but Leatherface plays more like Jason Voorhees, making it feel more like a Friday the 13th flick. This was the last movie to be given an X rating, before the NC-17 rating came into effect, which turned Leatherface, the Texas Chainsaw Massacre 3, into a commercial and critical flop. The franchise would go into hibernation again. Enter Matthew McConaughey. Texas Chainsaw Massacre: The Next Generation was one of McConaughey's early movie roles, and along with fellow star-to-be Renee Zellweger, you'd think this would do well at the box office, right? Not really. Although McConaughey absolutely eats up the screen with his absurdly deranged performance, the filmmakers make some offbeat choices.
Welcome to
my world.
Apparently, the reasoning behind why the family lure and torture people in their house is because they're actually working for a secret society, possibly the Illuminati.
I want these people to know the meaning of horror.
What? (2003's remake was the first film I saw in the franchise, and that viewing still haunts me to this day. The plot is pretty similar to that first film, but it's the opening scene that has always stuck with me. This group of friends pick up a traumatized young girl on the side of the road who shockingly blows her brains out in the back of their van. All captured in one of the best shots I've ever seen. Texas Chain Saw 2003 is dreadful, dirty, and macabre in all the best possible ways. I adore this film. It's my favorite of the lot, and ultimately, I would say it's one of the best horror films ever made. After the success of the remake, they scrambled for a sequel, introducing an origin story that stuck to that same gritty feel. I mainly remember this entry as the one that starred Jordana Brewster from the Fast and Furious films.
You guys fuck all your cousins, or just the ones you find attractive?
6 years on, Leatherface is back in 3D. Texas Chain Saw 3D is a direct sequel to the original, and the filmmakers pay homage with an opening sequence that features the farmhouse straight out of '74. As a Chainsaw movie, it's not that great. Chainsaw 3D might be heavy on the gore, but its overlit and safe cinematography is pretty boring when compared to some of the other installments.
Go get her. Get her, Jen. Nobody messes with our family.
Another prequel attempt, this coming-of-age take gives us a look at Leatherface's childhood. This is probably my least favorite Chainsaw picture. It is, for lack of a better word, too clean. Not unlike 3D, it feels a little too overproduced and lacks the grunge that I would expect from this franchise, despite having some pretty brutal kills. This leads us to the most recent, but probably not final addition to the Chainsaw family. Texas Chainsaw Massacre offers us a showdown 47 years in the making, with the original film's final girl Sally seeking revenge on Leatherface for carving up her friends. It doesn't go well for her. While not heavy on substance, I think the 2022 film has some of the best kills in the franchise. Anyway, thanks for taking this trip down a very bloody memory lane with me. Watching these movies one after the other over the last few weeks has reminded me just how much I love this franchise. And it's got me all kind of pumped to play the new game. For an even more in-depth take on all the films, head to questdaily.com.au to read my full article.